Hi, this is Kit Shapiro, and you're listening to Awakened Nation with Brad Solis.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Solis, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people, just like you and me, from all over, who are doing amazing things. Welcome to Awakened Nation.
Kit, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great, and I'm so jazzed that you're on today's show. If you're a fan of 60s Batman and you are a fan of great classic music, you're in for a real treat today because I have Eartha Kitt's daughter right here on the show, Kitt Shapiro. And we're going to be going down memory lane. Am I right, Kit?
Indeed, we are.
Yeah,
you and I have memories too. So we have to, we have we've worked together and done a lot. So
we have a little bit of kismet with my father. Had met your mom as well. So I'm going to read some of your bio here. You're the president of Eartha Kitt Productions and Simply Eartha. And you're an only child. You and I have that in common.
That's right.
But you are the mom to several young adults who decided to move out to the West Coast and say, bye, Mom. But Eartha Kitt is such an American icon. And I got to tell you, you're sharing your mother's legacy. And we're going to also talk about your charity work as well. What's the name of your charity, by the way?
Well, I've been doing several of them actually. So there's one that we've been doing, which my mother started, called Kitsville back in Los Angeles. I have another one I work with called Neighborhood Studios here in Fairfield County, Connecticut, as well as the American Cancer Society's Women Leading the Way to Wellness.
Awesome. So we're going to be talking about that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Kitt Shapiro.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's go down memory lane. You're growing up and your mom's taking you all over the place, but let's talk about your mother as an icon of this. She's hanging out with Sidney Poitier and all the top names at the time, and she meets your dad. Let's go down memory lane with that.
Growing up in the beautiful 90210 Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, California. It was a very interesting upbringing. My mother kept me very separate from the lifestyle of the Hollywood lifestyle per se. So it was pretty ordinary growing up. She was a real, hands-on mother. And we had a vegetable garden and we had chickens. And this is in the middle of Beverly Hills, remember, in the 1960s. This is long before the organic movement became a thing. And I know, and I was never allowed to go to public school. I wanted to go to Beverly Hills High School and all of that, and my mother sent me to French schools, and she thought education was really, really important, and learning other languages was important. But you kind of grow up in show business with a famous parent, and you don't really think of them as a famous parent because it's just what they do. It's just who they are, and it's the norm. So I didn't really have any comparison. I was born, my mother was already famous, so I didn't know anything else.
Yeah, that's how you this is life.
Yeah, exactly.
My mom sang and played the piano, and she was sort of a celebrity in our hometown, and that was just normal. It was I related more to the Partridge Family than to the Brady Bunch. I'll tell you that, because my dad was our roadie, so that's what made that funny. But a lot of people may not know this, but your mom was Catwoman. And I know this is the most iconic role, and everybody asks you about this, but, I think I was kind of I don't think I was a weird kid in the 60s and 70s, but I had a huge crush on three celebrities. And that was Diana Rigg as Emma Peel on The Avengers, Nichelle Nichols as Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, and Eartha Kitt as Catwoman. And I have to be honest with you, she's my favorite Catwoman for one simple reason only. She didn't act like she was playing Catwoman. She acted like she was Catwoman, and it was kind of scary and sexy and like Whoa. And I think she set the bar very high. Can you talk about that?
Well, I think it's interesting because she was always sort of very feline in her movements and in and
Hmm.
who she was, and certainly her speech pattern was very dramatic and over the top, and she would enunciate clearly, so it was very exaggerated, and I think that's why a cat playing a feline character was so appropriate for her. She also was a woman who was incredibly strong and self-empowered, but understood that she had the ability to use her sexuality and her sensuality to get what she wanted without being overtly sexual. She would play the game, and I think that was an interesting thing that they did with the character of Catwoman. And we look back and how, yes, she was wearing the skin tight suit, and yes, she was, incredibly sexy, but she was a very strong character. She was the villain. She knew who she was within herself. She was trying to get something, from Batman and, get over on him, but she never lost sense of who she was. And I think that that's, it was very empowering, even though it was, it was a very campy series, obviously, and it was not really, there's no reality in it. But it was a big risk, for the network to have taken in that time. Here was a woman of color wearing
Yes.
a skin tight suit
Yeah.
in having this sort of sexual tension with a white male lead.
Yes.
And that was a risky, it was risky on all parts, on everybody's part, my
It, wa-
mother's, the producers.
it was very risky at that time because I remember, yeah, that was having a black woman in a position of power, even playing an arch villain. And I remember Star Trek, people actually wrote in to complain that Nichelle Nichols was on the deck of the commanding officer and almost the right hand to Captain James T. Kirk.
Right.
Uh, and we look back on this today, you know, we have quite a mix of talent all over television, radio, and movies. But back then, this was a huge milestone, which I love that your mom was a big part of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But your mom was also she was outspoken, and there's a story that you tell, and I love this story, even though it's heartbreaking. But she was invited to the White House, and she
Hmm.
told it like it is during the Vietnam era.
Right. Right. She felt that she'd talked to a lot of young men who were eligible for the draft, or who had been drafted, or were draft dodgers maybe, and that they didn't understand why we were involved in Vietnam, which of course a lot of people felt, but not a lot of people spoke about at the time. Um, and my mother did get an invitation to the White House from Lady Bird, the First Lady, to attend a luncheon of all women, and talking about, there was a subject, there's a topic of the day. And the topic of that particular luncheon was, why is there so much juvenile delinquency in the streets of America? This was 1968, 1969. And my mother raised her hand, and all the women who'd gone around the room and spoke and gave their opinions. And my mother raised her hand. And when she stood up, she questioned our involvement in Vietnam, and that maybe it has something to do with our involvement in Vietnam, and that these young men don't want to go and fight a war that they don't think we should be involved in. And that was, needless to say, a controversial opinion. Certainly, it was a controversial opinion to be said out loud, and it was a very controversial opinion to be said in the White House, which, of course, my mother at the time said, that's sort of the house that stands for freedom of speech, right? Isn't it our amendment to be the right to to free speech? And if I can't
Yeah.
speak freely in the White House, where can I speak freely? Well, apparently, you can't speak freely in the
No, she couldn't. She called
Nope.
him on it. All these dead soldiers coming back. Why are we in Vietnam?
Yes.
And what happened? She got blackballed in the industry.
Well, she got blackballed because the president, Johnson, gave a directive to blackball her. He initially put a word out to the FBI to investigate her background, and they came back with no anti-American, no communism. I mean, don't forget, this is right at we were, at war with the Russians, for eternity at that point, and they were really the bad guy. And so if you were not American, you were considered communist. So the FBI came back and didn't find any grounds for communism. And so Johnson said that he instructed the CIA to go out and to find anything they could on that woman, quote unquote.
Wow.
And there is a dossier. In fact, when Watergate broke, Seymour Hersh, right, and Jack Anderson called my mother from the New York Times and said to her, "Do you realize that there's a dossier here on you?" And she had no idea that that the government had compiled, hundreds of thousands of pages of, we were being followed, our phones were tapped, and everything. When you think about the amount of resources that were put to follow not only my mother around, but me. I was, an 8-year-old kid. So yeah, it was pretty mind-boggling to my mother at the time, and disheartening, and she was really hurt by it. She really felt that her country had turned on her, and here she was just being. My mother was an incredibly proud American, and would have fought for this country if she'd had to. And she believed in everything that the United States of America stands for constitutionally and historically. Well, maybe not everything historically, but she believed in the principles. And so the fact that they were calling her un-American and that they had put out the word on the street, the Hollywood street, that Johnson said, "I don't want to see that woman's face, anywhere." And she noticed that she had stopped getting, as much work. She used to perform in Vegas, and she was on the Mike Douglas show and the Merv Griffin show, and all of these other shows all the time, and always worked in the United States. And so luckily because she had always also worked in Europe, as jobs started to they started to dry up in the United States, she would take more opportunities around the world. As work in the United States started to dry up, other countries, opportunities in other places around the world, venues that had been asking her to come and perform there, then she went and she was able to, to do that. But so when she discovered that the reason behind all of this was because President Johnson had given this directive to, he said, "I don't want to see that woman anywhere in this country, on any television, on anywhere, billboard." And that's why the jobs weren't as quite, there were people, Mike Douglas, there were people who didn't listen and hired her anyway. But she was really hurt by the whole.
I would be.
Yeah.
I mean, for those of you listening who may be younger and don't know this point of history, Eartha Kitt was at the White House, spoke to Lady Bird Johnson, Lyndon B. Johnson, our president's wife, and basically told her, "Hey, our kids are coming home in body bags. Why are we fighting in Vietnam?" And we were losing. And if I remember correctly, she burst into tears. Lady Bird Johnson was crying. But
my mother said that it was said that Lady Bird was crying. My mother said that she did not witness the first lady in tears.
Right.
So
okay. So
that was true.
Okay, so what happens is all of a sudden now she gets blackballed, and loves this country dearly. Thank goodness, as all the work dried up. And by the way, if this is the first time you're hearing this, it's because she had been blackballed in Hollywood and couldn't get any work here in the United States. And thank goodness for over in Germany, I heard she was incredibly popular.
Yes.
Who knew that?
And in Great Britain and Australia. And the Far East, there were a lot of places in the world because she spoke so many languages, because she wanted to be, she wanted to learn how other countries and other cultures lived. She made it a point to learn other languages and to sing in them and to speak in them. So many countries loved that because she became somebody they would want to have perform in their midst. And so she took it as an opportunity to see the world, which of course she'd already done, but she wanted to see more of. And luckily she had that ability to do that.
So you got that international flair from being dragged all over the world, right?
And literally she dragged me all over the world. And I'll tell you, the one thing my mother believed when you went to all these different countries, wherever it may be, is that she said, it's not, you don't stay in, you don't just go to the tourist places, and you don't just stay in the hotels. And because, we were blessed, we could stay in, these 5-star hotels and in the best neighborhoods. But my mother really wanted to learn and to expose me to how the world truly lives, and how other cultures and other societies and other people live, and what the world is really like. And so she would talk to taxi drivers, she would talk to the hotel staff, and she would say, take us to where you shop. Let me see your homes, take us to the marketplace. And if I tell you that she did, and we did, and I learned very early on that Beverly Hills, California was not reality.
Oh my goodness.
Shocking as that may have been to anybody.
Yeah. Well, your mother had the chutzpah to speak truth to power. That's what I liked about her. She didn't censor herself. She was a tough woman before we knew what that was. And that's what I loved about her. Just incredible talent. And I want to talk about this a little bit. When I look at you, I think you look exactly like your mom. You're a combination of your mom and your dad. But a lot of people, and I've had this in my own life. My wife is from Haiti, and she's black. And her nephew, if you look closely, looks exactly like the family resemblance, but he's light-skinned and he has golden brown eyes. And people used to give her a hard time when he was little. They thought she was the nanny or the nurse. Mm-hmm. It's like, that couldn't possibly be your kid, And you just look at people like, do you not see that they look alike? I mean, people, you don't... you embody blonde-haired, blue-eyed look next to your mom, and people gave you a hard time sometimes. Am I correct?
Yeah, and still do to this day, which is, I mean, it's not surprising. Obviously, people are often thrown.
They're ignorant. Let's just say it.
People get thrown by the coloring, but I do, as you mentioned, if you look at my mother, and if you see me next to her, or image or photographs, I do look very much like my mother. Now, my mother had no control over how I came out. I mean, this wasn't like she planned what the color and and how my hair was going to look and everything. So it's interesting, though. My mother loved the fact that she gave birth to this mutt. She would say, you are a walking United Nations. You can either, fill every quota or break every rule. She really appreciated that you couldn't pinpoint exactly what I was. But there are people to this day who, on social media, on my website, I recently had somebody literally say to me, your mother lied to you. You are definitely not her birth child. She must have adopted you, and there's no way you could be her kid. Well, first of all, I find that to be hysterical, because in 1961, what black woman could have adopted a white baby? So that in itself was like, that wasn't happening.
Exactly, yeah.
And second of all, I'm the only child, so it was me or nobody. And my father is as white could be. And, genetics are genetics. What can I tell you? I can't,
I don't know what the hell happened in health class. They used to teach certain things, but it's like, if you have an interracial couple, let's say a white man and a black woman, you have 3 choices when that child comes out. They're either going to look pure white, pure black, or mulatto. They're going to be right in the middle. And so you just kind of crack up when people look at you and say, well, you're blonde-haired, blue. It's like Eartha Kitt stole some white kid from the hospital. It just makes me laugh my ass off,
Me too.
I'm laughing because it's funny as hell. Or years later, this white family has a child that looks black, and it's because the mom didn't tell the mom before that dad was black. So America is about mixing and creating this milieu. We're the ones who broke the trend from the rest of the world, and so we should embrace that. We should love it. But I think we should all have to take a DNA test, because I think that would, at least there'd be one less thing everybody could fight over, because everybody is mixed up. It's funny. I've watched those TV shows where they're doing the DNA test, and this one guy, he just hated, I forget who he was Muslim, and he hated Jewish people. And then it turns out the DNA test came back and he was Jewish, and the horrified look on his face was priceless. And I love stuff like that.
Yeah, because DNA does not lie.
Oh, it doesn't. So I want to talk about childhood. You're hanging out at the house and famous people are coming over and you don't really care that they're famous. You don't even know that they're famous sometimes.
Right.
It's just who came to the house and you're just like, yeah, it's uncle, so and so, and they were in a movie together. Whoop-de-doo. Talk about that.
I mean, I remember, well, listen, my mother played Vegas. I mean, we were in Vegas all the time, and Sammy Davis and Sidney Poitier was there, or you'd have, I mean, I can't. It's so funny. I can't even remember half of the people. Diane Carroll would be around, and they were friendly, and my mother was friendly even with Liza Minnelli, and actually one time even Elizabeth Taylor. They weren't friends, but they obviously had mutual respect for each other. But as a young adult, I remember meeting Sting because my mother she sang one of his songs in the Disney animated feature film Emperor's New Groove. And so we were sitting in Sting's apartment, and he was teaching my mother this song, and my mother's standing there, and he's sort of singing back up, and his musical director is playing the piano, and I'm just sitting there looking out the window and thinking, okay, I'm good. That's it. I don't need to see anything else.
You've met Sting. You're done. Gordon Sumner, school teacher turned rock singer, jazz singer. Yeah.
And the day after that, my mother and I went to have lunch with Colin Powell. So that was a week that I was just, walking on air. I was just flying high.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing. People don't realize that this is just life. This is just normal. You're hanging out with the caliber of people. The one person I've always wanted to meet was Sidney Poitier, which the class that he brought to the role in the heat of the night. Definitely. My dad loved that movie so much that when the TV show came on, I don't think he missed a single episode. He just so much respect for and what I loved about your generation that your mom comes from is they didn't play black roles that were stereotyped. They would be pissed. I love the fact that they stood up and they would tell, someone off. I remember Sidney Poitier said something that he went to the director and the writer and he said, hey, I ain't doing it this way. I am not doing this role this way. And I love that about your mom.
Not easy. Being trailblazers, not easy. And I don't think any of them did it fearlessly because a lot of time there was a lot of, backlash. But I think that they, trailblazers understand you have to be willing to take the risk. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, if not for you, not only for your own self-worth and your own ability to sleep at night, but because there will be the next person. And so you have to be able to, someone's got to stand up, and when enough people stand up, eventually, a change is effected.
We are in a day and age where I'm very passionate about this. I hate when stereotypes are played in certain roles. I get really furious. And we still have roles where they expect the black person to just be the jokester and tap dance in the corner. And it's like, damn it, can we move forward? Could we, for the love of God? I've been watching Tracy Morgan's show, The Last OG, and he plays an old gangster, from the hood who comes back into the neighborhood and he's stuck in those old stereotypes, and his ex-wife married a white guy and they're the perfect, intermixed family, and they're like, hey, you can't talk like that anymore, and hey, you can't. So it's this great, wonderful mix, and I was surprised at the power of the show. It's just wonderful. And then I see TV and movies and literature trying to do better. And so I'm feeling better about these things. But my mom was a big, fan of equality. She would have washed my mouth out with soap if she had ever heard me say anything derogatory. She was the kind of person who just, if a person was sitting alone in a restaurant, my mother would drag them over to our table.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so as a teenager, of course, I used to be embarrassed by that. It's like, oh, geez, Louise. But now I realize I'm exactly like my mom. So what parts of you are exactly like your mom?
Well, I think some people would say I'm a little too outspoken.
Really?
I know, shocking. I'm such a wallflower. In fact, one of my mother's musical director once, I was making a joke about something, and I said, I'm a delicate flower, and he said, "Sweetheart, you're a cactus if I ever saw one." I mean, it's so. Yeah, I was told by another person that I have enough testosterone to fertilize my own eggs.
That
So I
is
think
funny.
that kind of says, I'm very similar. Apples don't fall far from the tree. The difference is that my mother was very deliberate and very well thought out when she spoke.
Yeah.
And she would take a beat before she spoke, and she didn't react.
Yeah.
Whereas I have the opposite. I have the foot and mouth disease. I talk now and I'll think about what I said later or something like that. But I'm
Ye-
also, I think when you're raised by a strong woman, and you probably become a very strong, independent woman, and
Yeah.
it's that's what happens.
Yeah. I mean, I find it a blessing. I love when a woman is strong and stands up and says what's on her mind.
Hmm.
But like I said before, your mother brought class to every role that she stepped into. It's like looking at Patrick
Yes.
Stewart, looking at Peter Dinklage, looking at Sidney Poitier, all these actors who had broken through these classic stereotypes that we all looked at and brought so much class to the role that you really can't mock that sector anymore. You really can't make fun of,
No.
because you look at what they did and you just go, the wow. That's all you can say, because you're seeing somebody carrying themselves with dignity and class, and that's what
Well,
I
that was one
love.
thing that my mother really felt was important. And she tried to instill in any young person that she would meet, that she would say to them, if you walk into a room and you carry yourself with pride, with dignity, your head held high, you enunciate and speak clearly, people have no choice but to treat you differently. If you fall into the trap of acting like the stereotype, then you can't really expect to be treated differently. So if you want to be treated differently, you have to act differently. And to her, it wasn't about, as many people would say to her, "Oh, you're acting white. You think you're white." To her, it wasn't about that. It was acting like a human being with class and who respected themselves. And even though my mother played a character and often had this, it was a very sexual or sensual character. She felt, and she was always fully clothed. It wasn't about being overtly, blatantly in your face sexy. It was really about being, in her way, in her ideas, feminine, and using her femininity to add to her pride in who she was.
I love that. I just simply love that. I really wanted to talk to you about something that a lot of people have lost in history, and that is the original Santa Baby. Your mom sang that, is that correct?
Right, that is
Let's.
true. The song was actually written for my mother by
No kidding.
yeah, yeah. Um, it was written by a gentleman named Phil Springer and Joyce Javits, who was the niece of Jacob Javits. And they wrote it, which I always find it so interesting how many Christmas songs are written by Jews. It's the irony of
It's
that.
so
It's so
true.
amazing.
Well, all Rankin Bass did all of the Christmas specials. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer,
Right, right,
and they're
exactly.
Jewish. And I have
Right.
to say thank you, because they did such a great homage to all of these wonderful stories. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So your mom sings Santa Baby,
Yes,
and,
she
and I
recorded the
can.
first time she recorded Santa Babe, I think was 1951. Yeah, 1951.
Wow. A lot of people think
And
it's Madonna who came out
well,
with it,
interesting.
or
So when Madonna recorded her version, Madonna's version is almost exactly, it's the same um, arrangement as my mother's version was. But you'd be surprised how many times that my mother's version is licensed every year for compilations, for stores, for different soundtracks. And yeah, they often come back to the original, right? I mean, the number of people have recorded Santa Baby, but my mother's was the original.
I love it. It is my favorite, and I'm a jazz fan, so I like Billie Holiday, and believe it or not, Nichelle Nichols was a famous French singer before she became Lieutenant Uhura.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So yeah, and your mother's version I just love because it's the cadence, it's the way she
Yes,
sings, a
yes,
little
I get that.
babyish talk in there, a little sexiness, and not
Yeah,
everybody can pull that off.
playful. It's very playful.
Definitely playful.
Yeah.
I want to talk about how you and I met, and this is interesting. You're, and a lot of people may not know this. In Hollywood, when there is a person, that person becomes a brand, and lawyers get a hold of it. And if you have your fame arc can go up and down throughout your life. Look at Elvis Presley; that's a good example.
Right.
But once they get a hold of it, a lot of times they sit on it. And we met through a mutual friend of mine, and you were trying to get this brand away from the lawyers and into your hands so that you could reinvent it, relaunch it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when we sat at the table, I had forgotten this story. My dad told me this story when we were kids because I liked Eartha Kitt. I was watching, Batman. He goes, I met her. My dad was going to college in Davenport, Iowa, and he got stuck in a snowstorm, and he has this little car that couldn't get out of a rut, and this big car comes up behind him, or pulls up alongside, rolls down the window and says, "You okay? You stuck?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm stuck." And there's this woman in the car, black woman, and she goes, "I'll push you out." And so she gets behind and she pushes my dad's car, and then she comes up alongside him again. She goes, "You okay?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you so much." And he didn't know who it was. And she basically goes, "Hey, I'm playing at this club downtown over the weekend. Come down. What's your name?" Gets his name, everything, puts him on the list. My dad goes to see her. Here's Eartha Kitt, your mom. And so my dad had been saved by your mom, typical mom stopping in the middle of Davenport, Iowa in the snowstorm in a fur coat, because
Of
she was
course.
dressed to the
It
nines.
was cold. It was
Yeah.
winter.
And so he tells me that story. And then years later, I meet you and I go, your mom helped my dad, and I'm going to try my best to help you. And that was the beginning of us rescuing the brand and creating Simply
Yep.
Eartha. And
Yep.
talk about this because you have a retail store now. You have stuff in all the different catalogs in the stores. Tell us about this brand because this is a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, my mother died on Christmas Day. The irony that she recorded Santa Baby was not, of course, lost
Wow.
on anyone who knew her. And that she died on Christmas Day. So she died on Christmas Day, 2008, which I find crazy that it's been that many years. And, my entire life, my mother had said to me, when I die, don't let who I am and what I have done die with me. Don't let the brand that I have effected and developed and curated die. So, after, and we were very close and we lived only a few miles away from each other. And I worked for my mother for many years for Eartha Kitt Productions. And so when she passed, it's sort of like, well, now who am I? I'm an only child. So I'm no longer somebody's daughter, which is in itself a bizarre feeling. Um, and I really felt that I needed to do something, but I wasn't sure what. And so the brand started as being, I was taking her handwriting and her words, and I was just putting them on, I made a little booklet and I did little things. And then it started to evolve more because as I started to talk about my story of growing up with this amazing woman and being parented by a woman who truly was of the earth and way ahead of her time for women's rights and for eating healthy and for saving the planet and recycling, and I mean, you name it, she was ahead of it. That it's started to evolve and become this tribute, a daughter's tribute, to her legendary mother. But it's really, we have it. It's called Simply Eartha Accessories That Say Something, because everything my mother did or touched, was a statement. And so it evolved to become a line of accessories, home accessories, and some jewelry pieces that have her hand-drawn heart and her words, some
Yeah.
of which are in her handwriting and some of which are, just in a font. And it's so interesting because I feel like everybody has a legacy. We all have a person or relationship in our lives that is very significant. Mine happened to be with my mother. It was a very much of a love story between,
Right.
a mother and a daughter. But it's because my mother happened to be famous that it stands out. But meanwhile, words, we can relate to each other, and my mother loved the art of conversation. So I take her words and pass them on to others and hope that they start conversations for other people.
That's the one thing I regret, that you and I could have met a little bit sooner, because I really would have loved to meet your mom, and not just
Mm,
as a fan, but I loved everything she's been through. She is the embodiment of someone that I choose as a friend.
mm,
They don't put up with crap. They stand up for themselves. They have a mouth, and you either
right,
get us or you don't get us.
right.
That's life. And yeah, she was just wonderful. And now here's a fun thing. When I went to your house in Connecticut, I was just, my jaw dropped at the memorabilia that you have.
Yeah,
It definitely is a homage to your mom. You want to talk about some of that? Because the Disney films she did later in life,
I
and
know.
the gowns that she had, that were laid out. And trust me, ladies and gentlemen, I am a straight man, but man, do I appreciate the hell out of this. You
It's
had the
pretty
wardrobe,
impressive.
you had
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, it's really very cool. I mean, there are a lot of pieces, but there are a lot of things we don't have, and we don't have the
Yeah,
Catwoman costume, obviously. I mean, that's owned by, the studios, but there are things that were important to her and anecdotes that she remembered associated with a lot of these items. She felt that her fans were very much like her family, and their support
yeah,
and their love was what kept her going. She was an orphan, and aside from me, she didn't have any family. And so
right.
she remembers, if a fan would give her something, she remembers the story. She remembers, what where she was and why they gave it to her. She didn't care if it was handmade or store bought, because to her, if somebody went out of their way to think of her, then it didn't matter,
Yeah,
what they did, or what it was. It was the thought that went behind it. So I have all of these
yeah,
incredible pieces of her life that are just, amazing treasures, little treasures, not valuable on many of them not valuable on on the open market, but because they were valuable to her,
yeah.
because they meant something to her, they are truly treasures.
Now, tell me the award she's won, because she's gotten Emmys, I believe.
So she won
Emmys,
three Emmys,
right?
one before she died, and then she won two Emmys after she died, which is
Wow.
just the irony of being able to post mortem be able to
Well, it's her.
still get
It's
that. Yeah,
her.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Still, she made sure she left her mark on this world, no question. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
her voice was, needless to say, incredibly unique, and her Emmys were for vocal work done for Disney, and the Disney Television Network.
Yeah, because she had a very distinctive voice.
Yes.
That was the best part of it. Yes,
Which is so funny
Batman. Yeah.
because she was from a little town in South Carolina, a little town
Yeah.
called North South Carolina. And the woman spoke, people often thought she was European or she was from the islands, or no, she
Yeah.
was from South Carolina. But she believed that if you learned how to speak clearly and enunciate properly, then you could accomplish anything.
Well, I originally thought she was from Haiti, because
Mm,
she carried herself with such class, and she
right.
spoke French. And I just
Yes.
assumed she's either French or she's Afro Caribbean. And
Yes.
when you told me, no, she's from this town, and I went, what? Talk about um, creating your own class, being able to carry yourself a certain way, and just being this. She lived the icon that she is, as far as I'm
Well, I
concerned.
think when you talk about, we now talk these days so much about visualizing, visualization, think about it and put it out there, write about it. My mother, as I said earlier, was very deliberate. And I think
Yeah.
that she intentionally created this persona, that she, on some level, knew would help her get to the next place. If she could ever get out of the South, which she was able to do at a very early age, because she was so poorly treated in the South by
Yeah.
the Black community, because she was called what they referred to as a yellow gal, because she was too light to be
Right.
accepted by the black community and too dark to be accepted by the white community. So she was really abused, physically, sexually, emotionally abused. And she had an aunt in New York City, and people who I guess wrote to the aunt and said, if you don't get this girl out of the South, they're going to kill her, because they would beat her on a regular basis. And so
Oh,
my mother was
that's
lucky enough to be brought up to New York City at probably the age, she doesn't remember exactly how old she was, but she was probably around the age of 9 or 10. And I think she understood that once she was able to get out of the South, she could elevate herself, as long
yeah.
as she created something that wasn't able to be stereotyped.
Wow.
That's what she did.
That's a testament to her strength.
No question. No question.
Now, you have the fan club too, and you discovered your mother has a huge gay following. They love her to
Yeah,
death.
they
Yeah.
really do. Well, I think it's because my mother was always supportive of the people who were outcast.
Yeah.
And because she understood what that was like to be, outcast by both sides of, your genetic makeup, right? I mean, you're not accepted by either race, so that kind of puts you in no man's land. And so she could relate to people who were ostracized because of their not being part of the norm. That she truly, and she would, she cared. She didn't care what
Yeah.
you look like, or what
Yeah.
you did, or what your education was, as long as you were a good person, and a caring,
Yeah.
kind, and were willing to, to be the best human being that you could personally be. My mother didn't
Right.
care, who you were, what you did, or what you look like.
Yeah, your mom had that class and that civility that I see in like Lena Horne, and many of the icons of that era. And I feel that's a part of almost Hollywood royalty. When you see Nat King Cole, and then you saw Natalie Cole pick up the torch for her dad and do an
Yes.
album. I feel like you're following in that footsteps of really picking up the torch of your mom's legacy, this classic example of an icon from a forgotten, I feel it's a forgotten era of Hollywood. They don't teach this anymore to young people. If you ask a young person who Humphrey Bogart is, they kind of look at you and they may know he's an actor, but they may not have seen any of his movies. Um, this is a
No, it's
period. This is a period in history I think we should be talking more about, and we don't.
I agree, because I think there was a level of class, as my mother would say, that was important for celebrities to embody, and to the way that they would, put themselves out there to the world. Now, we didn't have all of the outlets, media outlets that we certainly do today, and people's telephones are, they walk around with these little media devices. But my mother really felt that as long as you carried yourself well, and you treated other people with kindness, and treated yourself with kindness, that's so self-love, and love of, and when I say love, I don't, she was not one who felt that we had to love each other. That wasn't what she felt. But she truly believed that we have to learn to accept that you and I can be different and still live next door to each other. And that doesn't mean that we have to be even friends. We still have to be friendly and civil. And that is just the, accepting that we're all a part of this globe that we live on. And one of the things I'll never forget, as a little girl, we had a vegetable garden, and I would sit with my mother in the garden, and there was a slug, crawling on. And who likes slugs? I mean, they're creepy little things, right? So I said to my mother, "Oh, Mom, you got to kill that." Now, I was little. I was probably 3 or 4. And my mother said to me, "You don't have the right to kill that. You don't have to like it. You don't have to think it's pretty. You don't even have to be friends with it. But you don't have the right to to remove it from this earth. It serves a purpose just as you do." And as I became older, and you think back on these lessons that our parents teach us, and these moments, and I think, wow, what kind of an impact did that have on a 3, 4-year-old little girl, right? Who, my mother is saying that a slug, and I can think we pretty much all guarantee that none of us would like to be friends with a slug, or have one. But my mother's point is that it's entitled to exist. It's taking up its little piece of real estate. You take up a piece of real estate. you both can live in harmony. Just don't talk to each other. I don't care.
Right.
But and I think that is such an important thing. It's not about having to love each other. It's just
Right.
about accepting the fact that we all have a right to be here.
We all have a right to exist. I love that story. How do people get a hold of you if they need to order products or if they need to reach out to you? And
Well,
you
there's
have a new
so many different
store.
ways now because I have
So,
apparently I didn't get the memo about retail and I bought a retail store last year. As my husband said, why? So I own a retail store in the town of Westport, Connecticut, and the store is called West, W-E-S-T, and it is a multi-brand store of curated fashion with a West Coast vibe. And I also carry, surprisingly enough, some Simply Eartha items in the store. So can be found at simplyeartha.com. And also I can be, my handle on all the different interweb places is at Kitt, K-I-T-T, Shapiro, Shapiro. And you can find me on Facebook and Kit Shapiro page, Simply Eartha. The handle for my store is West, W-E-S-T, the number 2, westport.com. And there is my 60-second plug, shameless plug.
awesome. I love what you're doing, but the most important work that you do, I think, right now is your mother died. I'll let you tell the audience how she died and why you're so passionate about your charity work.
So my mother died from colon cancer, and colon cancer is the third largest cancer killer in the United States. It kills more people than breast cancer, kills more people than people realize. And unfortunately, it is also the easiest well, I shouldn't say easiest. It is the most treatable and the most beatable of cancers. Because if we all go for a colonoscopy, which is not necessarily the most pleasant testing, although you're not awake, so it's not like they're asking you to participate. But if we all go for colonoscopies and they happen to find a small little polyp, they snip it off during the colonoscopy, and that could become, but it could become cancerous at some point if it wasn't already. They do the testing and it's gone. So now I have had 4 colonoscopies, and my first 2 were completely clean. My third colonoscopy, they found a small little polyp and they snipped it off. And my last colonoscopy, they found 2 little polyps and they snipped them off. And that is why you go and you have the testing. There are also other non-invasive testings nowadays. If you really don't want to get the virtual colonoscopies and others. But I'm so passionate about the importance of getting tested, getting screened, talking to each other about, talking about our colons is not as sexy as talking about our breasts. So, it doesn't get quite the hype.
Ain't that the truth? But here's the powerful reason, ladies and gentlemen. Eartha Kitt ate pure organic food. She watched everything she put in her body. She was incredibly healthy and health conscious. So that was the reason she didn't go to the doctor to get herself checked all the time, because she figured, like most people who are into health and nutrition, I'm doing all the right things.
Yep.
And unfortunately,
and she would say, I feel great. Why do I need to go to the doctor? And that's exactly the reason why. Because there are sometimes things that happen that if we go and we speak up to the doctor and tell them this funny little things that we don't even think are relevant, and mention it to them, that sometimes it could be preventive of something much more serious than we could even imagine.
Get your colon checked, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Kitt, for being on today's show. Now, I have a lightning round I always do at the end. I ask you 3 questions, and you answer them the best you can. But we get a chance to know you a little bit better, because we're hanging out, we're listening to all the stories about your mom, but you yourself are a great mom, great wife. You're a crackerjack running around Connecticut. I love your energy. We've sat down for sushi and you're just going and going and going. It's so great. So are you ready? We're going into the lightning round. Goody. Okay. Number 1, What is your favorite memory?
Wow, my favorite memory is this. Boy, you stumped me with the first question. Jeez, not even
Take your
fair.
time. I'll edit this. Take your time.
My favorite memory would be going just being at the beach with my mother while she would jog, which she did every morning on the Santa Monica beach. She would jog, and I would sit at the lighthouse at the lifeguard stand with my peanut butter and jelly on toast while she did her exercise and watch.
So you were like a coach. Yeah, you keep going,
Well,
Mom.
yeah, I'm like, I'll be right here. Come back when you're done.
That's funny. What kind of music do you like listening to?
Country. I'm a
What?
huge, yes, I know. How shocking is that? I am a huge country music fan.
I can't stand country, and I got locked in Nashville, Tennessee for 4 days to do a keynote, and I was calling everybody going, get me the hell out of here. Now, there are a couple of country and western songs I do like by certain artists. Like, I love Garth Brooks. I think he does it right. I like the classics,
Yep.
like, Dwight Yoakam and, some of those guys, but oh my goodness, I am shocked. Our listeners are our listeners are shocked to hear
this. A lot
this.
of people would never suspect that, I know.
Yeah. What do you want at the end of your life to look back on and say, I'm really proud I did that?
Well, I have to say, I'm about to turn 58 years old. And last year I bought a retail store, and I ended up in an industry that I never, ever anticipated being into. It was an opportunity that a door opened, and I said, I have to do this because I feel so strongly about community and connecting with human beings and the importance of women-owned businesses and supporting your community. And I could go on for days. But what I realized more than anything is that it's never too late to start something new. And that, I think, is the coolest feeling. And I think women, we tend to reinvent ourselves many, many times because that's what women do. More so than men, and then that's not a comparison in a bad way, it just is
but it's true.
reality.
Yeah,
and
true.
I think it's just really, really cool that how incredibly supportive other women have been of my change. I have put myself out there in this last year and a half, like I never had anticipated. I participate in more philanthropic, organizations and more community-based organizations, and people to people. And I have fun, and I think I don't take myself too seriously. And I think as I try to say to people, I mean, this we're talking about a jacket, people. I mean, this is this is not brain surgery,
right? Well, it's kind of interesting. I have a lot of celebrity friends, and I don't let people know that I know them. I keep it hush hush. But you post these pictures of you in these outrageous outfits, and I go, Kit, what the hell's going on?
Think about my poor children. They're mortified.
Mom is outrageous, yeah. And I just love, that you put yourself out there. You're strong. You're independent. And I've seen people wear bright outfits to get attention. You just wear it because this is who I am. Yeah, this is what I do. It's sort of, you're almost like a New Yorker with your brassiness. It's so much fun. Yeah.
It is true, but as my mother taught me, I don't take myself too seriously. So I don't, I do things, and I'm the first to laugh at myself because that's the greatest gift my mother gave me. Two things she gave me that were amazing. One, she gave me incredible love, which you can't love it. The loving a child the way my mother loved me is priceless. And two, she gave me the ability to laugh at myself and to not take anything or anybody too seriously, because life's just too short.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kit Shapiro, thank you so much for being on Awakened Nation, Kit. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Don't forget to reach out. Go to simplyeartha.com. Also, Kit Shapiro, that's KittShapiro. She's on all the social media platforms, and she kicks ass and takes names. Once again, tune in next week for another great episode of Awakened Nation, my friends. Take care. Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement.
This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success will be because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.